I want to talk today about my work. It is basically about the salt as a material, and the process I use is time, and it's really essential to the work that I do. I've been working with salt brine evaporation, and I call them salt watch experiments, since 2001. And there's a lot of things you learn along the way. One of the things I've discovered is that salt evaporation is kind of tricky. It doesn't always operate the same way, and I at first had assumptions that it would all turn out a certain way with little square crystals, and it would leach out as if the first ones I did. But it soon became evident to me that salt operates in various different ways and under different climates. So it's very humid, it takes a long time to evaporate. If there's a wind blowing, it makes a difference as to how the crystals form. It also depends on the type of salt I use. And traditionally I've been using sea salt. There's a variety of different kinds of sea salts, and they kind of make different things. Sometimes I get patterns on the table that are just like lacy drawn patterns, and other times it becomes just a little forms. I call it like automatic drawing, and it ends up as if you're creating land on the surface on which you're working. And it's been very mesmerizing. Every time I think, oh, I don't know about this stuff, I keep on trying something else and finding it really, really engaging. Salt is a really profound medium. I think of it as a building block of the earth. It's found all over the world. It's especially, in the sea. We, as human beings and many animals, are very dependent on salt in order to just keep living. We all know our tears are made of salt, our taste like salt, our blood, our sweat, it's all got infused with salt. And so the idea that salt isn't necessary, or the idea of a no salt diet at all, isn't exactly the greatest idea. But as we all know, why no salt diets have arrived here and been kind of encouraged is because people take in too much salt, and then of course it can affect blood pressure and various things like that. So salt can heal, and it actually can assist in dying or creating ill health. It also is very important in preservation, and that's maybe one of the main things that salt has done through history with human beings. We use salt to preserve, and traditionally it was fish, hams, cheeses, all kinds of things, and that placed a great value on salt. It was very, very valuable, more valuable than gold at some points in time. And whole cities, Paris and Venice, were hugely dependent on salt as being part of their economic trade. We all know the story of Gandhi marching to the sea to claim the right to create salt for India, by Indians, not something that the British had control over. So it's kind of something that it's extremely fascinating. A lot of books have been written about it, and I'm always kind of discovering something new about what salt is all about. Salt also is mined only 20 miles or so from here. It's actually, we got the salt that we're using in the show from Belle Plains, not too far away from here. And it's at this point in time, it's a byproduct of the potash industry. And we had nice discussions with the fellow who helped us get the salt, and he explained how it comes to them in a brine form from the potash mines, and then they actually evaporate it in order to create salt, and it's good for baking and for various things like that. And it's ironic that now I've cooked up this salt that they lovingly crystallize, and I'm going to have made a brine with the salt itself. And then I've come to think a lot about the idea of time. First of all, I'm very dependent on how the salt works as to what the outcome happens. And sometimes it's just remarkably beautiful, and sometimes it's very plain. And you're sort of, it plays to mind, is beauty important? It asks all kinds of questions about what salt is. The final products always remind me of kind of a wasteland of some sort, almost an archaeological site. And yeah, it's something that I've really wondered about. And if you think, you know, many places in Saskatchewan have been created by there's salt under the ground. Watrous, Belle Plaine, I think there's a variety of things. And it means that it was part of the sea at one long time ago, and that the rock salt was actually formed. And if you think now they have to mine for it, you can just imagine what this land looked like in a way that before it all got evaporated, receded, and we ended up with land, and the salt just being something that comes up from underneath the earth. About 2007 or so, I started playing with the idea of working with meals and the salt brine evaporation. Before that, I was working a lot with just putting various objects in large bowls and allowing it to crystallize. I did things on pieces of glass and allowed the evaporation to happen. And I did my first piece in my studio, and I'm not going to start with showing images of that. This image is from 2012. It is the first kind of large-scale piece I did. It was done in the Franco-Manitoba Cultural Center in St. Boniface in Winnipeg. And all of these people at the table are authors, they're writers. They write in the French language. And they get together regularly. They've all been published. And they're a real fun group, as you can tell. You can get an idea of a little bit of where they are. This dinner happened in the gallery. Everybody contributed some food. We also had, people took time to read little excerpts of their work. So you'll see their books and pieces of paper on the table. Now we'll go to the next slide. I kind of just had it, there's a placeholder. This is probably maybe 5 or 6 weeks into the whole show was up for 7 weeks. And this is probably 5, 6 weeks into the evaporation process. And you can't see it too well, but icicles formed along the side of the, or I don't know what you call them, but they're salt, and they are kind of hollow tunnels of salt, and they formed along the side. I salted the papers as well, so it's sort of like in Manitoba there was a time when all French language was banned in the schools and people were not allowed to speak French. And so this idea of reviving the literature and the language of the French Canadians is a very, very important movement. And so all this work is being published, but I'm obliterating it once again. And that was sort of a kind of an idea that, you know, kind of related to the history of the place. Maybe you could go to the next one. Here's some details. You can see they were really wonderful with the food: pomegranate bits, quails, ribs, beautiful cheeses. They eat well, and it was a really wonderful experience. Okay. And you can also see on the wine glasses that the red wines are kind of getting a bit thicker, and at the end the red wine all had a bulge going in one direction and the white wine not. And it was, I don't know why that happened. Those are the kind of examples of things that are really kind of not expected. Okay, the next slide, please. Then in 2015, I had another kind of experience. I was invited by the Raw Almond Gallery. The Raw Almond Gallery is one that occurs every January, and it's a collaboration between the Raw Architectural Gallery and Beer and Almond, which is a really hip, good restaurant in Winnipeg. And Joe Kalturnik is the curator of the Raw Gallery, and Mandel Switzer is the one who's the chef. And they put together a restaurant on the river. They get a designed special tent structure, which becomes the restaurant, and they have various chefs that they invite from around the world. And it's quite an amazing feast if you get a chance to have meals outside in the middle of winter, minus 20 below, inside of a tent like this. They also warm it up quite a bit at nighttime. But I was at first engaged to work with one of the chefs, and none of them wanted my great idea, so I kept on pushing it off, and finally it was the last, the whole restaurant was over, but they were having a party for everybody who had worked on the event and were involved with it. They said, okay, you can do it for the party, and I thought, oh, well, that sounds good. So during the day I set up the thing. These are boat shapes of ice that I produced, and on it I put heaps of raw salt, which, you know, salt melts ice, and that's one of the important things that that salt is used for in all of our roads and sidewalks and what have you, and in making ice cream too, that it lowers the temperature. We'll go to the next piece and you can get a better idea. This is what happened at night. The lights were amazing. It was very, very warm, and the salt started really making cavities within these little ice boats, and a lot of them actually melted away. Now the next one is a detail, and you can see I had taken an old fur coat and made pelts out of beaver type pelts with it, and created a little beaver animal with little eyes. And I guess, you know, you think of poor people eating a dinner and looking at these beaver eyes. It may not have been the best way to do it, but as a you know, an installation at the party, it was really, really terrific. And then finally, the next day they had to tear down the whole restaurant, and it was left out on the river, beside the river here, and it was just out in the sunlight. And it was kind of a neat thing, just most of the boats had completely melted, and there were just little remnants of it. So that was that thing, and I really enjoyed working in minus 20 below weather doing this kind of a project. Okay, the next one, good. The most recent piece that I've done with food was in conjunction with another artist, Lisa Wood, at the Gallery 1C03, University of Winnipeg. And at this time, we decided to recreate it was called Cafeteria. And we wanted to recreate a part of the lunch time in a school cafeteria, university cafeteria. The university cafeteria has round blue tables. I made up these tabletops that were the same color, blue. We ended up, the restaurant that runs the service is called Diversity. They donated the food for this, which was really remarkable. And we had over 35 students and staff come through the whole an hour and a half, and they went and picked up their lunches at the cafeteria, which is a few steps away really, and brought it to the table and had their meal. We had kind of had them remove it so the next group who came to sit down wouldn't be looking at everybody's garbage. And at the end, we replaced all the, not all of them, but most of the plates and cups and things like that that had been used, because some tables were very full of people, or like a rotation. At the back, you can see Lisa, the other thing that we did, and I do quite a bit, I've used a lot of time-lapse photography. And we had taken Lisa had set up cameras at each table and taken time-lapse photographs of people eating, because she paints people eating. So that was a kind of an interesting thing for people to agree to. And I had another camera set up just to kind of have a process of the whole thing, which I had also done part of me for the Franco-Manitoba Cultural Center. A video was shown. So if you show the next slide, you can see the video there. You can see one of the stills of people eating at the table and having conversation and everything else. And you can also see how the cafeteria lunch plates and the food, I was surprised how much poutine came through. People were really keen on poutine and various soft drinks and things like that. So it was kind of a colorful but very unpredictable kind of table. Can you go to the next one? Here's just a close-up of Lisa's work, her photographs and some of the drawings and collages that she started, her process. And we're going, when I come in March 2nd, we'll have a cafeteria too. And then this one will be very different, because Lisa will have made large paintings based on these drawings and photos. And I will have some of the things that have the fragments from the leftovers of the meal. And maybe we can go to the next slide. But you can see a detail of how that tabletop looked and how various lunch things turned out. Okay, we can go to the next one. Good. Here, one of the things I have been doing is taking still photographs of what's left at the table, and it has become another type of art practice where I'm examining what happens, trying to make it almost like a Mars Range Rover, where you end up going and looking at a table and observing it from different ways and see if you can interpret it. And you can see this one is kind of, you know, colorful. Do you want to give me the next one? I have a few examples of the kind of work. And I've made these into prints. Okay, next one. Orange peel. The next one. Okay, and then this takes me, I'm going back to the first work I did, which was in my studio. It was called the Tea Party's Over. I was very annoyed at the Tea Party movement in the U.S. I was hoping it would come to an end, but I guess it bit us in the butt in another way. This was in conjunction with a group of friends, and particularly a friend, Diane Whitehouse, who's a painter and has been a prof at the University of Manitoba. She came from England and was very, very well acquainted with the Tea Party. In fact, her father was a tea salesman in England, and so she had kind of the whole proper British Tea Party down to pat. And we had the scones and the ripe berries and the clotted cream and petit fours and some snacks, and her mother made it. It was kind of a jiggly rabbit with, yeah, it was lovely and it was fun. And so this was something, this is actually where I got started taking photographs, and the light that we had on that table in my studio was really remarkable and was able to get some very nice images. And I'll just show you a few more of these. Here you can see some of the really interesting patterns. I always think that the pattern at the bottom looks a bit like a rabbit or something. Yeah, here's another one. And then here's the last one. Oh no, here's it. And here's that kind of icicle forming. I'm hoping we'll get something like that from this particular installation. Okay, next one. And here are two of the teacups before they were finished. You will see a number of the teacups upstairs when you go to the room, because we have a few examples of work that I brought that I was able to preserve. So that was from 2010. Some of it's remarkably durable, and others of it isn't. I also have worked on time-lapse photography and created time-lapse videos, which are on my website. I'll just mention that you'll be going up to the Tea Party upstairs, and it's kind of what the intent was to create sort of a typical prairie tea party that I grew up with, where fancy sandwiches and dainties were served, and women would bring they would make them and bring their best serving dishes and to the event, and you'd have either for a shower or for maybe a church event, or particularly funerals. That's one of the things that is used. And I collected and used dishes, of course, from that are now very plentiful in secondhand stores, because many people are passing and their children don't want them because they don't have the value they once had. People used to value silver plate tea services and things like that. They're very cheap now because really nobody wants to bother polishing or working. They don't work hard. That's just not how it's done. I'm super nervous when I remember being young and just being nervous all the time using these little tea things because they were delicate and I don't know, they were just silly. And but it's gone now. That kind of entertaining is certainly gone by the by. And if you mention what you're doing, people say funeral food, and it is kind of used as a commemorative feast now. I've gone to a few funerals with that in it, and that's something that's taken that way. And it won't be in the next generations at all. It's something that is kind of gone by. And it's interesting to know that the tea, serving of tea and the producing of these tea services and tea ware, the British was very much part of the British trade. And tea was a British, controlled by the British people mainly, and you could know that there was the Boston Tea Party. It was, people were sent to different colonies to create a tea ceremonies. I lived in Africa when I was very young, or in my early 20s, and I was teaching, and every day a tea was served by somebody, and it was part of the ritual there. And yet it doesn't grow in Africa, or it does now, but it wasn't at that time. It was imported from Britain. So it's part of the trade and the whole mythology. And then, you know, we know now that coffee is made of, is much more powerful and served more often. But the tea is something that traditionally was something part of the trade and part of colonialization. And they do say that some of the bone china, I'm sure not the ones we have here, with ground bison bones were used to create it. So there's something, another reason perhaps why this is also fading, is that we're less dependent on Britain for giving us our ideas of how we should live and things like that. So I think that's pretty well all for now. I don't know anybody else would like to.
And you'll probably answer some questions upstairs
Oh,
as
yeah.
well if people have.
It'll be easier.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot.